Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the Board of Governors and the Affinity Committee, we're really excited to have this group of panelists with us tonight as we close out Women's History Month. In normal non-COVID times, I think one of the best events that the Board of Governors does, in my personal opinion, is the Women of NA Luncheon. It's always a great day and so nice to hear the stories and see the accomplishments of so many alumna. And obviously with this virtual platform, we can't all be together in person, but it also enables us really to get a group of people from all over the country together. And we're fortunate to have the panel we do, where each panelist has agreed to tell her story, a little bit about her journey to where she is now. And we're thrilled to have you here. So we are going to start with brief introductions. We figured out before we're going to go in the order of the flyer. So Amy's going to go first, and I'm going to ask each panelist just to introduce yourself, the year you graduated from Newark Academy. Tell us a little bit about your current position and where you are currently living.
Hi. Well, first off, since high school, I have taken back the ethnic pronunciation of my name. I was Amy, but now I go by Ami. So I'm Ami Sheth, and I am from the class of '96. I am an actor here in New York City. I do mostly television and some film, and I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you. Sandra, you are next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sandra Batista, class of '89. And I live in New York State in Rockland County in the village of Nyack. And I am a geographer.
Nice, welcome. Excited to have you. I think next up, Tanya, you're up for introductions.
Hello, everybody. I'm Tanya Taylor. I'm class of '86. I live in Bergen County in New Milford, New Jersey, for now. I actually just took a position at Radisson Hotels as general counsel. So as of the summer, my daughter and I will relocate to Minneapolis.
Nice. Chloe, you're up.
Hi, I'm Chloe Miller. I'm class of 1994. I'm in Washington, D.C., and I'm a writer and writing professor.
Thank you. It's actually a little side, but it's interesting because Chloe and I graduated together, and it's like so cool too to be, just to interrupt for a second, to be here and see familiar faces. And I see her parents and I remember them from school as well. So welcome. And then last but certainly not least is Robin, who I also remember from days at Newark Academy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Robin Silverman, and I just recently moved from New Jersey to North Carolina in October, so that's a very new thing. I graduated in '92, and yes, of course, I remember my friends here. And I'm really excited to be here. I'm a child and teen development specialist, and I write books. I have a podcast that I host called How to Talk to Kids About Anything. And I write for New York Times, CNN, and do some expert spots on morning shows.
Thank you. Now, in terms of the panel and some of the questions we have, I mean, we want to really have a very open and candid discussion. We know a little bit about each of you, obviously when you graduated, what you do, but you've obviously had a journey since you left Newark Academy to your current position. So we're hoping each panelist can tell us a little bit about your journey from Newark Academy to where you are now and really how you got there. So I don't know if whoever wants to go first. We don't always have to go in order of the flyer. Please feel free to jump in.
I'll jump in. So graduation, I graduated assuming that I was going to be a pre-med major. I went to Georgetown for pre-med. I got there the first year, and my roommate was a French major who I thought had way more fun all day. And so then all of a sudden I became, kind of lost in the wind, undeclared, didn't know what I was going to do. And I just followed classes that I enjoyed. Next thing you know, I ended up in law school at University of Pennsylvania. By that point, I knew I always wanted to do a corporate focused practice. So I had no interest in litigation. So I focused on the business side of everything at law school. Came back home to New Jersey, and I worked for a small firm, well, large by New Jersey standards, small maybe from national or global. And I proceeded to get different corporate transactional experience. And I ended up going in-house when they had the big .com craze, and I've been in-house attorney ever since. That's about 2007. I was working for a privately held company that involved all different types of industries rather. So I was like a jack of all trades, but a master of none, which was a little bit of worry for me. So when Wyndham Hotels called, I thought, well, I could go from a small privately held company to a large public company, dip my toe into hospitality and actually have a niche, which I do now. So I stayed at Wyndham, and I went to a Singapore-based company for 2 years. I took a brief hiatus into a telecom media company as a startup with an old boss of mine. And now I'm back in the hospitality space. So happy to be there and plan to stay. I lucked up and reconnected with an old internal client from Wyndham who hired me at Radisson, and that's how I got here.
Thank you. It's definitely an interesting journey, and
Yes.
it shows you, I think, too, well, that's it. You don't necessarily, right, need a straight path. So
no, I thought I would have one. And that's why I say when I decided to be undeclared, it was very unnerving, because as a person who, particularly a place from North Academy, you're kind of pushed in a lot of ways to have a plan. And I didn't, all of a sudden, for the first time, I didn't have a plan. So that was hard, but it all works out.
it's very true. Thank you. Who would like to go next?
I can go next.
Okay, great.
I left Newark Academy in '92 and headed off to Washington University in St. Louis. I had a wonderful experience there. And for my junior year, I went abroad to England and studied psychology and English literature, which I had also studied at WashU. It was a life-changing experience for me to be on my own and in the way that they studied there, which was very independently. Meeting with tutors once a week, and then sending you off writing a paper like, "Are mothers necessary? Go figure it out." And it put me on an interesting path of both writing and psychology at the same time. After leaving WashU, I took 1 year out to do some work as a preschool teacher and do some odds and ends there, and then went into my PhD program at Tufts University, where I found my own way. Instead of piggybacking on somebody else's research, I, with some crazy thing in mind, decided to do my own stuff. I had been very interested in body image in girls and decided to really delve in, looking at plus size models and trying to understand why plus size models had a view of themselves that was so different than typical women who didn't think very much of themselves as they gained weight. And these people were very comfortable in their bodies. And I was like, let's get more of that. So I studied plus size models and compared them to other groups, and found out some of their secrets. And then that became my first book that was called "Good Girls Don't Get Fat: How Weight Obsession is Messing Up Our Girls and How We Can Help Them Thrive Despite It." And that was in 2010. I was getting into television at that point. I became a body image expert for the Tyra Show, if you remember that show. And that was exciting. Started doing some spots on different stations, Today Show, Good Morning America, a bunch of the different Nightline, and then, Steve Harvey, and they all shared each other. So just going from one to the other as an expert in child development. In 2017, I decided to delve into the podcast world. I had already been writing scripts and trying to understand children for quite some time. My husband and I had run and owned a martial arts and fitness academy up in Massachusetts and had written a character education program that wound up not just staying at my own academy, but being used worldwide. So I was providing scripts for teachers and for parents on how to talk to kids about topics like open-mindedness, respect, discipline, those kinds of words, and on a monthly basis. And I still do that now. In 2017, I decided, let me try this as a podcast and have on experts and best-selling authors who could speak to the deep slice of the pie, how to talk to kids about death or sex or porn or technology, something that was maybe taboo, but we could really get our teeth into. I've been doing that for almost 4 years now. And not only have I'm right almost at 900,000 downloads for that, called How to Talk to Kids About Anything, but it's now becoming a book. So I'm writing a book for Source Books on the same topic that is dividing into chapters, like how to talk to kids about death or sex or porn or those kinds of things, taking a deep dive and utilizing a lot of those great interviews that I did on the podcast for that. So that's what I'm doing.
Very cool. I have one question before we move on to our next panelist. But in terms of the first book that you wrote and some of the secrets that you learned, about plus size models and the keys to happiness, is there one that jumps into your mind that really stood out?
I would say so. I mean, there were many, but one of the keys that I found was when I interviewed plus size models, when I asked them the question of what their ideal size was, they told me a size 12, 14, because in the plus size world, a 12, 14 in like a plus size model world is like, that is like when you get the most work. But if you ask that same question, and I'm sure you would know this also, I mean, that as a model, but if you ask that same question to women who are striving in the regular world, their size discrepancy is much smaller. And so they are talking about more like a size 2 or a 4 as what they're aiming for. That's extremely hard to get to. A size 12, 14 is actually an average size in America. So you're actually asking women to be striving for a size that's almost unattainable for most people, when the plus size models were saying that the size that they were going for was something much more average and attainable for a lot of women. And I also would say that they talked a lot about how their moms spoke to them about how they were beautiful just as they were. Not saying that, some didn't have their own issues, they did, but I feel like it rested a lot on how moms talk to their girls.
It's really interesting. I guess as a tail end of that, I guess for the next, I know, Ami, you were ready to jump in before, and I feel like you kind of would fit based upon what Robin's just comment in terms of modeling. So if you would like to jump in and tell us a little bit about your journey, that would be great.
I have a very kind of crazy, long, arduous journey. I actually went to undergrad after Newark Academy for pre-vet, because I really loved animals, and I ended up going to veterinary school. So I'm also a veterinarian, licensed veterinarian. I'm just not practicing. Acting has always been for me a creative release, something that I love to do. Even when I was in vet school, I was doing theater, and I just needed that different side of my brain to work. And I eventually had that become my full-time job. I guess also having my veterinary degree to fall back on was something that I always felt was very lucky for me, because it felt like a no-brainer because I have a degree, but all these wonderful opportunities were coming up. And if it didn't work, I can always go back. And I never did. Eventually, I got my very first show was as a veterinarian on Animal Planet. And that was kind of my segue. And that's how I went and got my agent. And from there, I started, doing non-vet things on television. But that was the very first kind of segue that I had getting into TV.
It's very cool how that all fits together.
It definitely doesn't fit, but I made it fit.
Well, it seems like, right, you were saying your story kind of is all over the place, but as you were telling it, it seemed, right, like it does fit together with the vet piece and television. So there you go. And then I know in terms of next, I guess either Chloe or Sandra, I don't know if either of you, which one of you wants to jump in and tell us a little bit about your journey.
I can go next.
Oh, go ahead.
Or you? Okay, sure. So after Newark Academy, I moved to Providence, Rhode Island to attend Brown University. I wanted to go to Brown in large part because I was interested in their environmental studies program, as well as they have had a Portuguese and Brazilian studies center at the time, but that later became a department. And I come from a Brazilian family. My parents are from Brazil and I had dual citizenship. And so it was really something that was important to me. And I had the opportunity to study abroad my junior year in Brazil. I studied for a semester in Rio. After graduating from Brown, my first job, like full-time job, I had a little gig in the summer, but in fall of 93, I started working at Newark Academy Middle School as a ecology and pre-algebra teacher. So I did that for 1 year. So some people on the call may remember that. And then I decided that I saved up some money and I wanted to travel and think about what I wanted to do next. So I did a lot of traveling in Brazil. And then after coming back to the States, after that period, I had some temp jobs until I found a job that I stuck with for a while. So the next job after that was at an environmental NGO called the Union of Concerned Scientists. Union of Concerned Scientists has 3 offices in 3 locations. I was at the Cambridge, Massachusetts location. There's also a DC and Berkeley site. And that job was as a project assistant on a project called the Sound Science Initiative. So I did that for 2 years. And about 1 year into that job, I wasn't really learning anything new. I was ready for a challenge and I decided, okay, this is a good time to apply to graduate school. So I applied, and then, one of the things I learned when I was studying abroad in Brazil, a lot of the classes I was interested in that had to do with environmental studies were in the geography department there. So I wasn't familiar with geography as a discipline at Brown. There wasn't a department there. But in Brazil, I did learn about the discipline. So when I was ready to apply to graduate school, I applied to a bunch of different places, but one of them was the geography program, graduate program at Rutgers, New Brunswick, which is actually, that particular department is on the Livingston campus, but as a graduate student, you're in New Brunswick. And I did both my MS and PhD in that department. I also did, I was an instructor. I did a lot of TAing, but TAing where I was fully responsible for the course, developing the course, teaching the course, everything. So I did that in the geography department as well as the human ecology department, and also did a bunch of research assistantships and developed a dissertation project where I did field work in Brazil, in southern Brazil. After that, I applied, I was accepted for a postdoc fellowship at the Earth Institute at Columbia University, and that was a 2-year postdoc. I actually extended it like 3 more months. So I did that through the end of 2010, and then in 2011, and when I was a postdoc, I was hosted by a center at Columbia, one of the centers at the Earth Institute called CEASIN, which is an acronym. It stands for the Center for International Earth Science Information Network. So after my postdoc, I continued and was promoted to the position of senior research associate, and that's where I've been ever since. CEASIN is a center, a research center and data center that specializes in studying and understanding human environment interactions, human environment systems. So there's a lot of, we use geographic information systems as a tool. And I work on a lot of different types of projects. Some projects are local, like I've done work on water quality data in New York and Jamaica Bay, but then I've also done work, projects that are international, like the one I'm working on now, which has allowed me to travel to several different countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Most recently, a lot of trips to Mozambique, where we use geospatial data related to infrastructure and demographic data to address issues in different sectors like the health sector, education sector, transportation. Yeah, so I think I'll stop there.
No, thank you. It's really interesting how, you've traveled all over, but yet, just even looking at water quality, you could do it across, the world. You could do it here. And, once you
Absolutely.
have that education and foundation, there are probably changes. I mean, I'm not a scientist at all, but I was understanding what you were saying. So, I think it's really interesting how once you have a certain skill set, like you've demonstrated, you can really go anywhere and use that information to learn, do research, and make a difference.
And I also want to mention, I see that Kalina Witcher is on the call. We graduated together from Rutgers, got our PhDs, got our diplomas on the same day.
Yes, we did.
That was very cool to run into you that day. It was a really special moment.
Great to see you.
Good to see you.
Very nice. Hey, now it's Chloe's turn to tell us about her journey post-NA.
Okay, so I went to Smith College. I changed my major a number of times. I initially signed up for Italian. We didn't have required classes, and I assumed, coming from Newark Academy, I should take a language class. And I ended up in this intensive Italian class that met every day, and I did terribly. I almost failed. And in the end, after changing my major from art history and English, I ended up being an Italian major after studying abroad. And I loved it. And then after graduating, I worked in marketing in New Jersey for a little bit. I taught high school, Italian at Sea Caucus. It was not my skill set. It was really hard work. I don't know how you guys all do it. And then I ended up getting a job in Italy with NYU in Florence. And I went back there for 3 years. I was a residence hall manager for their site. They have a number of villas where the students live. And then I came back to the United States for my MFA in creative writing from Sarah Lawrence, which was just a dream. It was amazing to come back and be able to just spend 2 years writing and be surrounded by other writers and have that be my main kind of job, so to speak. So unlike acting, poetry is not a path to great financial success or stability. So I've been teaching all of this time. And most recently, I had taught for a while in person at Fairleigh Dickinson. And since I think 2000, maybe 2009 now, I don't remember. I've been teaching online, and mostly their programs where adults are going back to school for their undergraduate degrees, and they're asynchronous classes. I've been doing this pre-pandemic, and it's amazing to work with these adults who are really serious about taking the required classes that most people hate, the composition writing classes, and they're dedicated. They see what they need to do, what's been missing in their life for work and professional reasons and personal reasons. And I really enjoy it. And it's a great kind of flexible job to give me time to write and be with my family. Since this is a women's panel thinking about equity and equality, I'm an adjunct, which means that it doesn't come with health insurance. And there are a lot of issues around not being a full-time professor. So being married, it does work out, but that's a bummer for most of the world and the structure and how universities are working. But so now we're here in Washington, D.C. I teach at a number of schools. I used to also teach memoir writing workshops at a bookstore, Politics and Prose here. But during the pandemic, that's too difficult. So I spend as much time as I can writing, which was also easier pre-pandemic when our child was in school. But one day we'll return to the world. So thanks.
Thanks, Chloe. And it's really interesting too, hearing Chloe's story, because I said, we graduated together. And when I saw that you were a writer, I think, we didn't have obviously social media in the same way after we graduated or through college, but then more as we became adults, it didn't surprise me at all, just based on everything you did at Newark Academy and how you wrote. So it's really interesting for me to hear your story, because I thought, well, of course she's a writer. Look at everything she did at Newark Academy, not knowing about the pieces in between. So I think that's interesting and actually ties itself into my next question, which I'm going to give to Chloe first. Thinking about Newark Academy and the time that you spent there, was there a moment or a teacher, looking back now, or even when you were there, that really helped carve your path or inspire you to be a writer and to be where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been thinking a lot. We got the questions ahead of time. I've been thinking a lot about it, and it's been really nice to reminisce. And I think the literature classes with Mr. Rowenhagen, I took a creative writing class with Mr. Rossini. The art history class with Miss Galvin was really, really important to me, thinking about looking and the history of art and how something is created within a larger context. And I think that really affected how I think about the creation of something. And all of the visual art classes too, even though I'm not doing visual art. I remember Mr. Aspel always saying, don't sit down and try and create a masterpiece. You can make mistakes, you can change things. I was not talented enough to make mistakes in painting and fix it, but I feel really comfortable with the idea of editing and playing around with words and writing. Probably Robin feels similarly. And being able to create something new and take risks without breaking anything and trying to create something new. And I think it all kind of fit together to move forward.
Thank you. I mean, it's interesting because it's, we all know each other from different snapshots of time, and we're all obviously adults now. But I think as you prepare for this panel and see the questions, it does really bring you back to certain moments that really are life defining, and whether you knew it at the time or not. I think in terms of that question, I'm actually going to go to Robin next, because you talked about, sort of carving your own path and really finding what you wanted to do when you were in college, and then talking about graduate school and beyond that. So when you think back to Newark Academy and how you now, as in your career, really created a unique career for yourself, putting together all of your interests, and it's constantly evolving. How do you feel like Newark Academy tied into that?
I talk about Newark Academy all the time. I really still do. It was life-changing for me. I barely got in, to be honest with you, to start off with. If I'm just going to be frank with you, I became a straight A student there, to the credit of the people there. But I barely got in. My brothers were going, my father went there. I really had a leg up. I was in a privileged position that I got in. And I then needed to prove myself. And I have to say, there were micro moments along the way that were, I have to tell you, really life-changing, because who came out of there was not who went in. I see some of my teachers right here on here, the Jacobys. Thank you for being here. That's so sweet. And I actually even worked with Julie Jacoby as my voice teacher, who helped me to hit my voice to the back of the room. I still use that skill. I have to use that skill all the time to fill the space. And of course, Scott Jacoby teaching me how to be on stage, and I literally have to use that all the time as well. I would say that even coming in seventh grade, the moments that stick out for me are, I had a math teacher, Mr. Hendrickson. It was his very first class, and we were the very first class. And I just remember how nervous he was going into that class. He was probably 23 at the time. And we were not that much younger, even though, we were little stunky kids. But I was certain that I was a complete idiot. I knew nothing. I was horrible at math. I had a terrible self-esteem. And what I found with each one of the teachers, and I would say Mr. Hendrickson personified this for me too, is that, he spent the time with me, that extra time with me during free periods, to learn that I actually could do this. And I still remember we took a test, this math test, and I had studied with him and studied with him and studied with him. And I met him in the hallway. Nobody else was there. And he said, Robin, I just graded your test. You got a 100. This was like life-changing for me because I don't think I'd ever gotten 100 on anything. And I said, are you sure? I mean, that's how, as unsure as I was like doubting his ability to grade a test. Really? Are you sure? And he said, I am not going to grade that again. He said, see, you can do it. And it would like moments like that, where you just mentioned Mr. Orsini, who, you know, in 9th grade, I still remember sitting there, we had been doing Shakespeare, and I was sitting in class and he asked a question and I raised my hand and he looked me straight in the face and he said, Robin, put your hand down. I'm saving you for a difficult one. It's these little micro moments that said, actually, you're smarter than you think you are. Actually, you have something there and we're going to nurture it. We're going to make it go further. And I still remember those moments because it was something that I took with me. And what I do hope I impart to young people that I talk to today, that you have strengths. And while we often tell people about where they're failing or their weaknesses, that these teachers showed me my strengths and I was able to build on those and build on them in ways that hadn't been done before, so that I was able to carve out my own path. And so that when I sat there, when they brought me back to Tufts University after I'd graduated with my PhD and they wanted me to speak to the students there, and they had said, can you tell me about your path? And mine was very windy. It was not the postdoc to professor. I was able to say to them, you know, you can forge your own path. You can build on your own strengths. So I'd say that Newark Academy was really important to me in many, many ways.
Thank you. And it's interesting because when you were telling your story and how you did carve your own path, I was wondering how, you know, a high school or middle school education would fit into that, particularly because you did really develop this career and a brand and, you know, everything that's really unique. But I think when you just said, when you're talking to young people, that you really try to focus on, like, you can do this and you do have strengths, that really, for me, and I think probably for everyone, I saw everyone nodding, that seemed like exactly what Newark Academy did for you.
Yes, very much.
Thank you. Right. So now in terms of, I'm going to go to Ami next. And I think a little bit, we know you talked about at Newark Academy, your love for acting. So I'm curious now too, in theater, how that really helped, you know, when you think back to that time.
Absolutely.
If there was a moment at Newark Academy, a teacher or something that really just carried you through, that propelled you forward in your career.
I mean, I think it's in the same way that Robin was speaking, you know, the Jacobys were a huge influence on my, you know, whether it was when I was doing chorus or when I was on stage, all of it, you know, just my arts background. And also the really rich amount of literature that we would read, diverse books, you know, I still remember reading Handmaid's Tale at Newark Academy, which, you know, a lot of people would say is kind of a controversial book for a young student. But that's the wonderful thing about Newark Academy. It just opened my mind up in so many wonderful ways. And specifically, you know, I do remember going into New York City with the Jacobys and going to watch theater and seeing people on the stage and being in awe of this other world. And, you know, full circle, the fact that I can do that now, that was, you know, some of the first eye-opening experiences for me that I got into that glimpse into that world.
Thank you. That is really interesting. How now, how is everything like in terms of being in the city and with COVID and Broadway? I mean, that's
it's really, really sad. You know, there's statistics saying 3/4 of the entertainment jobs in New York City are gone. Because, you know, entertainment is not just the theater, right? It's nightlife. It's a huge part of what New York City is. But on the positive, they are working to get all of the front-facing actors and theater workers vaccinated so that we can open up again.
Nice. I bet we'll all be looking forward to that, right?
Yes.
I'm going to go to Tanya next because, you know, it's interesting to me listening to your story and thinking you were going to be pre-med and, you know, now you're an attorney. I actually had a very similar experience in my life as well. So I can certainly relate to just a complete, you know, like when you're a kid or you're in high school, and even for you, once you went to college, you know, thinking this is what I want to do and I'm on this straight path. And then switching gears, you know, looking back now at your time at Newark Academy, do you think that there was a moment there, a teacher, a class, or something that really enabled you to make the switch the way you did and to end up doing so in such a successful way?
I would say, so I had my first impact from NA to Georgetown was, you know, you take the AP French class in Professor Borlow's class. Once the bell rang, you spoke French, and whether you had to go to the bathroom, you sneezed, you talked about what you did all weekend, that was it. So although I'm out of practice, so I am not fluent now, I was fluent and took AP French, and you know, you get a 5 on the exam, and then we get to Georgetown, they had this crazy placement test, which was like hangman in French. So weird. And so they put me in like basically like starter beginner. So I was like, this is just insane. So I go to the head of the department and I, you know, make an appointment, I knock on his door, and I did exactly what Borlow did to us. We did the entire conversation in French from start to beginning. I said, basically like, sir, I've read Camus. Like I don't, in French, I don't need, there's no way you can tell me I can take a beginner class. So he sat there, he kind of scratched his head like, wow. I was like, we're having this entire dialogue in language. So you tell me where I am. And so I ended up, you know, getting pushed up till he said, you have to take something because you just didn't hit enough. I said, I couldn't do that in English, by the way. That exam didn't matter what language it was. I just thought it was a stupid test and felt comfortable enough that I thought it was a stupid test. It didn't test anything about what I knew. And so I think when I look at kind of this transition, once I got to Georgetown and went off to a different path, then it was, well, what am I going to do? Well, what do you like? What kind of classes do you like? What engages your mind? Where did you find the most interest, no matter what the subject matter was? I mean, you know, whatever the book was, whatever the writer was, the class where you never wanted to miss, you know, no matter how tired you were, you wanted to sleep in because you were, you know, a college freshman, what were those classes? And that kind of push to open your mind, that's like a Borlow, Mr. Ball, that's what they were like. They opened your experience to other cultures, to every kind of writer. Like when Ami says that about my sophomore year, I took you know, I hate to say this because it's about Georgetown, but my sophomore year, I took an English class and it was her first year teaching. She had come from Yale, first year teaching at Georgetown. And I looked at the syllabus and every book on that syllabus I had already read except for one. That was it, Wuthering Heights. Everything else we'd read. I went home for Thanksgiving, not Thanksgiving, like maybe 2 weeks into the class. I keep everything because I found every paper that I wrote. It was like, I mean, I updated things because I was older and I thought a little differently, but everything was I knew then and there that what NA was, if I didn't know it before. But I think they're pushed to always experience other cultures, open your mind, open your heart, look beyond just the basics that you see about people and countries and cultures, and to get a better grasp of people and their experiences and how you connect with them on that level. That allowed me to find some kind of comfort to say, okay, so what do I like? Well, I like psychology classes. So I ended up being a psych major. I like my government classes. I was a government minor. I had zero idea what I was going to do with that, but I went with what spoke to me. but I don't think I would have had as much comfort to do that if it wasn't for professors like Mr. Ball and Mr. Borland.
Thank you. And it is interesting how, sometimes when you're in the middle of it, in school, and I think particularly in high school, you don't really see the value of everything around you, but I guess life is kind of like that, right? And then as
Yeah.
you
And then
move
it hits
on and
you.
move through, all of a sudden you realize, wow,
Yeah.
that
Exactly.
really,
Look at that. And you don't realize it makes a big impression on you at the time until it just, like I said, it seeps out in different places.
that's true. And it's interesting now, Sandra, I'm curious about your experience, but I think what also, it's interesting almost with this particular question, this kind of random order we went in, but I feel like it's actually flowing really nicely because also as Tanya was talking, Sandra, I was thinking about you when you were talking about, going to Brown and, not necessarily having, the focus, right away and then traveling and that whole experience. So I'm curious how much you also think, Newark Academy and your education played a role in terms of where you are today, how much you've traveled and how you do look at things in your job through a global perspective.
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of what's already been said really resonated with me. For sure, spending the 4 years at Newark Academy opened up a lot more possibilities in my mind about the future. I don't really have any particular moment, but I just feel like it was overall an extremely supportive and challenging environment, and that's what I wanted so badly. Like I didn't feel where I went to elementary school, I wasn't really feeling challenged, and I actually, once I got to Newark Academy, I had to do a lot of catching up, and it was a place where that was supported. So I was able to sort of do that like accelerated, math track so that I could get to AB Calc by my senior year, and I just loved, the science classes. I did really enjoy science from childhood, but didn't learn much before Newark Academy in school, and it was great to. I loved the biology classes. Took AP Bio. I loved chemistry, and I really liked the electives. So Mr. Limmer taught the marine bio class that I absolutely adored, and the ecology elective as well. So that was like a foundation for ecology coursework in college. So yeah, I just felt like it really helped build my confidence. It really helped fuel my ambitions. It was just a really positive period. And I was prepared. Once I got to Brown, I was prepared and I felt confident. I think I worked a lot harder my 4 years at Newark Academy than I did in undergrad. I won't say in graduate school. Graduate school is very difficult, but I will say that I had to work a lot harder at Newark Academy than I did as an undergraduate. I was able sort of as an undergraduate to, enjoy all the guest speakers that would come to campus, and my course load wasn't as much. Like I only had to take like 4 classes a semester. So it felt like, I had a lot more freedom, and I had to work, of course I had a part-time job. So I guess it was good that I wasn't so swamped with coursework. But yeah, I mean, I think it just really prepared me not only for my future education, but just for life. And, something like going abroad and studying in Brazil. I mean, part of that is also traveling with my family there. So I already sort of had that experience as well. But for sure, having the experience that I had in your academy definitely informed also my travel to other countries.
Thanks. And I think in all this talk about middle school and high school, in terms of questions, I mean, one thing that I always think is so interesting when we all have perspective, in terms of in high school, talking about, being in that moment in math class or, what you had to do in French class, where certain things too may have seemed either like the end of the world or how are you ever going to get through that? Looking where you are now and sitting where you are now, what is one thing you wish that you could go back and tell your younger self?
I have 2 things. Take statistics as early as possible. That's something that was a gap when I got to graduate school. I didn't realize I hadn't been guided or advised as an undergraduate. I wish I had taken some sort of basic stats course in high school, and then right away as a freshman in college started taking statistics, and that didn't happen. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is travel more. I would have, I did travel a lot, but I think I would tell my younger self to travel even more.
Thank you. Anybody else have thoughts that you wish you could tell your younger self if you could go back in time?
Well, I definitely would have done the travel abroad. I did not do that. And I felt, I don't know, I guess I felt like I would miss out on things at school. And so now I kick myself for having not done it, particularly because, I ended up, when I spent my 9 years at Wyndham, the second half, I was regional counsel for Latin America and the Caribbean. So I traveled a lot, and I spent time with people from all over, South America, Central America, Mexico. And then I felt like, why didn't you do something like this, when you had the chance? So I kind of kicked myself for that, and actually for not taking Italian. But at Georgetown, it was the same thing, Chloe, that it was only 6 credits intensive. And I was like, I'm not majoring in Italian, so I cannot spend this much time. But I love the language. And if I had made time, I just think it would have been something that if I had fit in, even if it didn't fit the picture, but if I could fit in the time, that I would have grown from it internally. Not everything needs to fit in the to-do list or the check the box list of all the things you have to do X, Y, Z, that there's sometimes you can just take it because you feel like.
That's really great advice. I like that. That whole, fit it in even if it doesn't fit the picture. I mean, I think that, so many of us don't really take the time to think that way because it seems like we're always going and doing, and probably even our younger selves felt that way too.
Yes, I actually told my younger brother who graduated from NA in '92, when he went to Harvard, I said, Dad's probably not going to like that I say this to you. I was like, but do what you like to do. Find your path, not just because it's something like, are you going to make a lot of money? Are you going to have a lot of prestige? Just focus on what you like to do and how you like to spend your time, because it will make a huge difference in your life. So we're 6 years apart. So luckily he took that to heart, and he did.
Thanks. What about the others? What would you like to go back and tell your younger self?
I think I would probably piggyback a little bit on what Tanya was saying and just tell myself to breathe more. Just relax. High school is not the end all and be all of your life. Just have fun and don't take it so seriously. Don't take everything so seriously, which is obviously an easy thing to say looking back. But yeah, I think I was a very serious child, and I wish I just took more time to take it all in and just breathe.
It's very good advice, right? And I think probably even more so if your younger self was a kid today, right? Like I think just in terms of the demands and everything that goes on, I wonder how much harder it would even be to take all of that in. I don't know, Robin, if you have perspective on that, if you could give your younger self advice based on what you see working with young people today.
I think for me, I had heard something probably in my late 20s that I wished I heard earlier. And it was something that somebody had written. It was something like, if you pretend to be something that you're not, half the people will like you and half the people won't. And if you are authentically who you are, half the people will like you and half of them won't. So which half do you want to like you? And I feel like through middle school and high school, there were times where you almost feel like you have a mask on, or you feel like you're not able to be authentically yourself, to take the risk to sort of step into your own shoes and really be confident in who you are. I feel like you're often, trying on different hats and trying to figure out who you are at the same time. But I think if I had that moment where somebody would have sat me down, maybe me saying to me, that you can be exactly who you are, and you will attract the people that you should into your life by being who you are. And those people who like you for that person that you may pretend to be at times those aren't your real people. Like that's not your tribe. So I think that would probably be the advice that I'd give.
It's good advice. I feel like even as grown-ups, right? It's good advice for all of us to take. Chloe, what about you? Do you have advice that you would go back and give yourself?
Yeah, I mean, so I applied to grad school a couple of years out of undergrad, and I got rejected. And there was the option everywhere I applied, I got rejected. There was the option to write to them and ask what happened. And one school, I don't even remember which one, wrote back and said, "You're really young. Even though you traveled abroad, you haven't done that much. Just go out and live life. And if you're going to write and you're going to create art, you need to have had life experiences." And I found that really empowering to just say, you know what? Let's do it. Let's do the things I want to do. And I wish I had kind of taken more chances earlier. I felt like I was really shy, and even study abroad when I was there as a student, I didn't talk that much. So it was harder to learn the language because I was scared to talk to people. And then when I went back the next time, I felt much more confident. Like, this is the time. If I don't do it now, I won't end up being able to do it. So really taking chances, and you want to try, do it.
I think it's excellent advice. And I think in terms of, I know we're going to start wrapping up or opening up for Q&A, and I have a question that's sort of some of the pre-prepared questions, but also just listening to everybody talk, and particularly when Chloe just talked about her experience. I think, and the advice she'd give her younger self, I thought, particularly we're all often talking about what we learn from what we've accomplished, the degree we get, the awards hanging on the wall. But was there a moment where each of you, where something didn't go as you expected, where maybe you were disappointed, where you didn't do as great of a job as you had hoped, but you were still able to overcome that and achieve success? I see a lot of nodding. I feel like we all have those moments.
I can start. So my poetry book came out this February, and I submitted it over 50 times. I just submitted it and submitted it a million, I'm literally over 50 times. I think 52 times I counted. Some were contests, some you pay for, some are open submissions, open reading periods. There are just many ways. And poetry is really hard, and it's really subjective. And I just thought, I believe in this book. One day it's going to happen. And to kind of bring this back to Women's Month, there are all these groups on social media for female identifying writers. And I put in there, I was like, maybe this is embarrassing. I feel like a failure. I have been rejected so many times. What presses don't I know about? These are the presses I've submitted to. I love them dearly. Surely the presses I don't know. And the editor of this press was like, hey, your book sounds really cool. Submit it to me. I'll consider it. And it ended up working out. And I think kind of admitting and asking for help, and like Robin was talking about, finding your people. Once you're kind of in the group, just asking questions is really helpful. And it was hard. It took years, but it's possible. And that's part of kind of this path, like you're talking about, Rebecca.
I think it's really interesting. And I think just how you also tied that into being Women's History Month, just the importance too of helping one another. If you've walked before somebody in a particular space, how do you make sure to look out for them? And if somebody also does approach you, asking you for guidance and advice, how do you jump in and help them, and not being afraid or feeling like you're in this all alone, or that you can't ask for help? So I think that that's a really important lesson as well. Who else has a moment that they want to share?
It's not one moment for me. I think being an actor is all about rejection mostly. It's about 1,000 rejections, and then the one time someone sees something in you and wants you to be a part of their production. That's just the nature of the work that I do.
And I would think probably in that type of situation, even like you said, it's just all about rejection. But when you do get chosen, I feel like it probably also is just such a wonderful, exciting moment that doesn't ever get old either.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Lots of highs, lots of lows, but if you're in it, you know that you wouldn't trade it for the world.
Thanks. I think that that's a good takeaway. And I think it's also that no matter how successful you may become, achieving something that you set your mind to achieve still feels almost as exciting probably as even your very first role. I don't know about others. Tanya, do you have any moments?
Funny, I was actually talking to my daughter about it the other day. And so college, I also had a lot of fun. I was in DC, so I had probably more fun than I should have had. And when we got to applying and decided I wanted to go to law school, well, of course, based on NA, Georgetown, I had my list of all the top law schools. And the guidance counselor was sort of like, that's not going to happen. And so it hit me like, like a ton of bricks. And so then there was it was the guilt, the shame of, how could I have come from such, like basically great stock and I'm going to, I'm going to have completely fumbled the ball, at this next step. And what do I do with that? So it was a lot to swallow, sleepless nights, like hair broke off, like, well, I was a wreck. But then like you pick up the pieces and even though he said it wasn't going to happen, I was like, okay, but let me look at the book because the little LSAT book or whatever tells you how much, like if you have this at GPA, you need this LSAT for you to have this percentage chance to get into the school. So I just really did the math. Okay, this is where I am. This is what I need. Wow, that's like literally in the very top grades of the LSAT. So take the class, do it over and over again, study like you've never studied before, and you get the grade. And now out of the 10 schools, you got waitlisted at 5, you got rejected at another 3, and you got into another 2. And so there is still a way, even if you've, like I said, fumbled the ball and you want to shoot yourself in the foot. That's just not the end of the story. Like, not to let somebody else write your story. So I had to give it a shot and see what was the best I could do at the time. I couldn't redo my college years, but I could do this differently. And so that's how it went. I took what was, in my mind, a whole lot of failures and rejections. And actually, I wouldn't have changed where I went to law school for the world.
I think that's a really interesting perspective too. Like as you're going through it, all of us, whether it's college, grad school, a job you really want, it seems like just the weight of the world is on your shoulders and it's the balance of everything. But looking back, for you just to say, I wouldn't have changed any of it. Nope. You ended up perfectly fine.
Where I was supposed to be.
No, Sandra or Robin, do either of you have any thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, so the experience that comes to my mind when I was all but dissertation, so this is like you've done all your coursework, you've passed your qualifying exams, and in my case, I had started my field work in Brazil, but I really wanted to be able to go for like a full year and do additional data collection. And so to get to do that, you need to apply for external funding. And at one point, I applied for 3 different grants, fellowships. And I had been, I've received 2 rejections. And the one that I still hadn't heard from was sort of one that I had heard from some professors was probably the one that I had the least chance of getting. So I was feeling like, oh, I'm probably not going to get that one either. So I was very close to giving up. Or not really giving up. What I was going to be able to do was just write up the research that I had done to date from shorter trips. And my department was okay with me writing that up, but it just was disappointing. I wanted to actually be able to do more. So I was like, on the verge of giving up, settling for just writing up what I'd collected until that point. And then, one day in the mail, I get the acceptance, the Social Science Research Council International Dissertation Research Fellowship. I had funding in 2003 to 2004, and I was able to, complete the data collection and, develop a much stronger project, get publications. So it's just another example where, you just have to be persistent and not give up. And then even if things don't work out, you'll figure it out. You'll figure something else out that's just keep going. Push ahead.
I mean, it's interesting because, right, and I want to hear from Robin, but it's like you read everybody's bio, you know, whether it's for this or anything else you attend, and everyone just has a whole list, right, of all of their accomplishments. And those are theirs and they're real, but it's behind that. You don't ever really know, you know, what somebody went through or, you know, what it was like to get from point A to point B. And I think we all forget that sometimes too. So Robin, how about you?
I would say one of the big lessons that I learned that came, you know, flying in my face from rejection is that when you get a rejection, sometimes it turns out to be better than you had imagined. So I do remember in college, my freshman year, I wanted to try out for their a cappella singing group. I was totally focused on wanting to do this and got the chicken pox instead. That did not go well. So then I was not available to try out that year. The sophomore year came around and I tried out for this group and I was really excited about it and made it to their, you know, final call and then didn't make it. Turned out that because I didn't make it, I was actually able to go abroad. Had I made it, I would not have been able to go abroad. And that feeling, that experience that I had going abroad was life-changing, really important lesson that wound up being applied later on in life when I had a really tough time. I was a child development specialist, and the secret was I was the shoemaker's daughter. I had no children because I had been trying to have children, but I kept having miscarriages, one after the other after the other. And I thought, I'm a fraud. Like, how am I even doing this job? And then it came to be that I found out about a friend who had adopted and found out that path after I had tried a lot of other paths that failed and failed and failed and failed and failed over 4 years, and wound up connecting with somebody and going through adoption and adopted my daughter. And 10 months after we adopted my daughter, I had gotten a text message from the birth mother who said, I'm pregnant again. So we adopted my son. And sometimes the things that happen that feel like, why does this keep happening? You know, what is this, a rejection or things are just not working the way I had imagined or I had planned? And it turns out that you're on a path that you're supposed to be on after all. So I think that's probably what I learned from I don't know if I call them mistakes, rejections, or just things not working out the way I thought.
Oh, thank you. I mean, this has been really wonderful. We have a few minutes for questions and answers. I see that there's a question in the chat. I don't know, Rashia, if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Hi, sure. Everyone, this has been amazing. I'm so happy to be here. I just wanted to know what's one of the most proud moments you've had in your life and in your career? Anyone. Anyone can go.
I mean, it's a tough one, but I think I can answer that. I mentioned earlier that the project that I'm currently working on has allowed me to travel multiple times to Mozambique. There was a moment when I was presenting in front of a large, let's see, there's probably it was over 100 people, I'm not sure exactly, but you know, it was mostly Mozambicans from a lot of different stakeholder organizations, people working on the census, the national census, people that I had been interacting with, but we were all gathered for a big launch of the project, and we were all gathered together. And I was presenting, and it was just like, there was this moment where I thought about all the things that led to that moment, from my mom, you know, teaching me how to read and write Portuguese at home in Newark. She didn't have more than a elementary school education, but she was able to teach me enough so that when I got to college, when I took the language test for my Portuguese classes, I was able to pass out of all of those Portuguese classes directly to the literature course classes. And, I credit my mom for making that possible. And, with each step of the way to reach the point where I'm here talking to the president of the National Statistics Institute of Mozambique, and these are my peers, and I've reached this level of that I never imagined could be possible. So it was really beyond any of my wildest dreams. It's sort of like what Robin was saying. There's this path that you can't really always predict, right? So you work towards it, but you don't really know exactly what's going to happen. So it was, a combination. It was a proud moment, but just like a recognition of how fortunate I had been, and then you kind of wonder, well, what's going to come next.
Does anyone else have thoughts on response to Rashia's
I'll go.
question?
So career-wise, I will say it came last year during COVID. Before I joined Radisson and I worked at the startup, I used to also have a few clients that I would help as they looked into different franchising businesses, because I still understood it, and a lot of people don't need it specific kind of help. And so there was one particular person who actually went to Georgetown with me. And she and her husband were looking at getting a franchise business. So I had helped them. And as they got towards maybe 6 weeks of 8 weeks, another 6 weeks to closing, her husband got COVID and he passed. And so what she thought was supposed to be something that they did together, she was now going to be doing on her own. She's, adult, young adult, but adult children. And so the day that they closed, obviously everybody was in tears. But being able to help her change her life and change her children's lives. So her thing was, thank you, because you helped change the trajectory of my life, particularly when I thought it was all going to go down the tubes because I didn't think I'd be able to do it by myself, and I needed more help to do it by myself. And I needed people to believe in me that I could do it on my own. And now, you hear her and she's, an expert, as opposed to being the brand newbie person. She's an expert and she's giving you all this advice. But that day was a good one.
Thank you.
I'll go. I'll bring mine back to Women's History Month. So twofold. I was part of an AMC show called Dietland that unfortunately was canceled after one season, but I really, really loved it. Loved being a part of it. It was an entirely woman-led show. All the leads were female, all the heads of every department were female, and every director was female, which, if anyone knows anything about the entertainment industry, is a very rare thing. And I was able to play an acid attack survivor. So I had about 3 or 4 hours of prosthetics that I did a day, where half of my face was burned. And I loved my character so much. And, she turned out to be this extremely strong presence on the show that, even though she didn't have, what would be traditionally thought of as a beautiful person, she was an extremely beautiful person. And as a character, lifted up the entire cast. So I was extremely proud to be a part of that production and bring the topic to light. And as a result, I was featured in Vogue India talking about the subject of acid attack victims. And the second part of that would be, at this point in my career, I'm part of a group called Kalakars. We have South Asian upcoming writers and actors and directors, and we try to kind of foster them. And as an actor myself now, I'm able to take on some mentees and really kind of try to help them find their way, because it is not a linear track to becoming an actor. You know, lots of, like I said, highs and lows, and there's just not one way to do it. And being able to help others kind of find their path has been really special for me.
Thanks. I don't know, Robin or Chloe, do you have any thoughts in response to Rashia's question?
Sure, I can go. I think for me, my proud moments typically have to do with when people get in touch with me online, or after I'm speaking, they send me messages and they say, I didn't know how to talk about this important topic. You know, somebody passed away, or I was really getting tripped up talking about another topic that was really tough for them. And you gave me the words to be able to open up this conversation with my child, and it really made the difference. Often I tell them, you know, I so appreciate those comments, because I'm writing in my pajamas half the time and I have no idea. I just like hope. I hope that it goes where it's supposed to. When I was in 5th grade, I was relentlessly bullied every single day. And it was a terrible time for me, and one that I remember vividly. And nobody knew what to say to me. Nobody knew how to help me. My teachers didn't know what to say. My poor mom, I felt horrible for her. I mean, I was home, you know, using boxes and boxes of tissues every day. It went on for months and months and months. And I think that because that kind of thing happened, I was really on a path that said, I want to make sure that the children that I can help are having multiple key people in their lives that hold space for them, that listen to them, that know what to say to them. And by providing these scripts and opening up conversations on topics that most people don't want to talk about, that I get to talk about on the news, or I get to talk about in articles. I find it to be a really interesting space now, that the little person that I was in 5th grade and not feeling like I had anybody that knew what to say to me, now maybe I'm providing a host of people who know what to say and how to listen to children who are in need.
Thank you. How about you, Chloe?
So kind of similarly, writing is such lonely, quiet, personal work. I connected with a composer, Lauren Spavelko, who set a number of the poems from the book to music, and she just kind of translated them into this completely new form with soprano singing and orchestras performing. And it's been this miraculous thing to see a translation of these tiny little poems into something else, and to hear her tell me stories, or to receive emails from people saying, thank you for writing about this. The book's about miscarriage and postpartum depression after a second pregnancy. And to be able to kind of take, kind of like what Robin's saying, but smaller, these really quiet moments that are usually shrouded in so much silence and shame, and to kind of open it up and speak frankly, and hope to have this dialogue, even if I never hear from people, but to then sometimes hear that there are these connections, is really, really moving and validating, because you never know what'll happen with your words.
Thank you. I think, I mean, this has been phenomenal. I mean, I don't want to keep, hold everybody over. Soon I'm going to turn it over to Nicole, but I don't know. I mean, I know we have a small enough group and everyone's engaged, whether anybody has any last question they want to ask. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Nicole, but really, I mean, this has been an honor for me to host this panel. I feel like I could be sitting here all night, and some of you I know, some of you I'm just getting to know, but I think that, it really emphasizes that the connection with Newark Academy is a very strong one, you know, and it bonds people together in different ways. And I think as we also, you know, close out with Women's History Month, you know, listening to all of you, you know, I did take a few notes, but, you know, just hearing, you know, confidence, carve your own path, you know, you never know who's listening, you know, you can be a mentor. Like it really, I think those are a lot of key points that we all take. And even to, you know, Chloe's last point, sometimes you don't know who's listening to you or who needs to hear what you have to say. And I think that also ties in a little bit to what Robin was telling us, what she would tell her younger self, you know, just to be authentic and be you. And if you are genuine and you're kind and you're interested and you want to learn and be a part of a community, I think, you know, there's almost no telling how much everybody can accomplish and work together. So, you know, thank you all for being here, taking your time, sharing your story. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Nicole.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo exactly what Rebecca has just said. It's been really amazing to hear all of your stories, and thank you so much for sharing your stories and your journeys to this point. I think I also just wanted to thank everyone else who attended in addition to our panelists. And I think tomorrow at some point, Lizzie will be sending out a survey that should only take about 2 to 5 minutes to fill out. So if you could please fill that out, that would be really great. And just thanks so much. I hope everyone has a great rest of your night.
Oh, thank you, Nicole. And I just want to also quickly thank Evan and Lizzie. These programs could not go on without the two of you, and, you know, just being involved with the Board of Governors and really on the ground level, it's amazing to me. You know, just how many emails I see, how many things on social media, and how many really high quality events you are able to put together, and sometimes in no time at all. And, you know, I think I could speak for almost everybody here. You know, this has been a very trying year for everybody on different levels. And I think the consistency, you know, that the two of you have had in your programming and your outreach, I know has provided me, you know, with a great sense of community and attending these panels. And I see familiar faces from others. It's been really great. So thank you both so much for everything you do.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank
And
you.
thanks
This was
everyone who
Thank
came
you. Thanks for
tonight.
having us. I appreciate it.
Woo! Beautiful way to end Women's History Month. Thank you all.
Good
Have
night,
a
everyone.
good evening.
Have a good night.
Yes, have a
Take
good night,
care.
everybody.
Bye.
Woo!
Bye-bye.
Yes.